How's it going, YouTube? Coin today with another video, and today, guys, what we're going to be talking about is the state of the game and really how far has the game come, and is it really going to be that great moving forward into the next format? There's a lot of different things that I want to talk about because this format is really unique, unlike others that we've seen before. And today I'm joined by Yishan. I'm actually really interested in doing a video like this, especially with meeting more and more content creators, because I've seen a few of Yishan's videos and I really do like the dialogue in them. If you're unfamiliar with who Yishan is, he does have a YouTube channel, and I'm gonna let him actually just go ahead and introduce himself and where he's been in the game, your tops that you've been a part of. Just kind of introduce yourself to everyone.
Yeah, hey everybody, my name is Yishan, and that's all conveniently the name of my YouTube channel as well. I think in terms of tops, probably the most famous one that I'm known for was getting second place at Lysias Portland with Grand Maju. That was a crazy event, and you know, I do a lot of Grand Maju content just because it's one of my favorite decks. Of course, more recently, there's been the remote duels. You know, I've been playing in some of the extravaganzas and the invitationals, and those have been fun. And you know, people always ask me, like, you know, do remote duel tops count? And the answer I always give is yes, if they're yours. So, so I got some of those. And then on the video side of things, I like to do, you know, deck profiles, but just about decks I enjoy. I also like to do a lot of, you know, analysis similar to this video, like discussions. And then I also like to do a lot of math and programming in Yu-Gi-Oh stuff. Like, I like to really dig down into, you know, the mathematics or the statistical analysis of certain trade-offs, and I like to explore those, and sometimes I do some pretty cool videos about those as well. So if, you know, that looks like something you might enjoy, you know, come check me out.
Hey, I really do appreciate you joining us here on the channel today. If you've not already seen Yishan yet, definitely go over to his channel and check out some of his content. I think that it's really cool, though, that you're known for a deck, especially being like Grand Maju content as it is, right? Like, I'm really known for Striker content. People come to me for Striker questions. And I always really find it funny, too, that there's so many different YouTubers out there, and if you just point to one direction, you're like, oh, they're known for that deck. I think that's really neat. How do you feel like that's kind of come across in the Yu-Gi-Oh community over the years? And do you think there's any decks that are really missing a Yugi-tuber?
Well, there's certainly decks that are missing Yugi-tubers. I think there's just too many decks.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's so many. I saw the other day, I don't know if you saw this too, but some I can't remember the name. Like a tier list for every single archetype ever in Yu-Gi-Oh! And there's like there's just so many. And so, you know, I'm sure, you know, there's a lot of archetypes that could have a content creator associated with them, but maybe that's up to us. You know, like, I've expanded into Tri Brigade, and you know, I just like to keep trying decks that I enjoy. But I think it's really cool to have decks that you like. That's what makes Yu-Gi-Oh fun, right? It makes it kind of cool. Format.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, a lot of people know that, like, my favorite deck is Striker, but my second favorite deck is Plunder Patrol, which is really weird because I used to hate Plunder Patrol. I thought the deck was garbage, and then they got the Raven, and oh my god, that deck was insane. And then look where it's at now. Like, it's actually doing really well. That's a deck that I really have been, like, pushing, like, besides Striker, because I really feel like it's such a cheap deck right now to pick up outside of Brave. That is just, like, another thing that people should be looking at. So I do like multiple perspectives from different decks. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, Plunder Patrol's a great deck. I mean, I just know when that deck pops off, you lost. It's time to go to the next game.
Yeah.
Sorry.
They get a lot of advantage.
Yeah.
So if you are still debating getting a mat, definitely go over to the Imperium Duelist website. The code is GGYGO10 for a small discount on that. You can get it as a single or a double cloth mat with zones or without. I'm very excited for this mat because they're all going to be getting shipped out roughly this weekend, maybe into Monday, and then everyone's going to have their own piece of GGYGO and their in every one of their games. So I'm really excited for this, though, because this mat really is beautiful. Big shout outs to Midnight Dreams. So just to kind of hop into our discussion today, one of the bigger videos that I saw from you that really piqued my interest was the one where you're talking about engines. And are engines really a problem in the game? And that's one thing that I think is really cool too, because engines have always been talked about for years now, right? As like we saw like the Terra Top engine, then we saw like the Brilliant Fusion engine, and we've just been seeing so many that now it's kind of just, we have so many, shove them all in the biggest deck that you can, and just, we're not really seeing like quote unquote pure decks anymore. We're just kind of seeing like a mixed bag of them all. So just to refresh everyone that may not have seen you before, what is your take on these big engine decks?
Yeah, I would say that my take in that video was basically I don't mind cards that are like engines. What I really don't like is how they've shifted the power level between the cards to cards you really want to draw and cards you absolutely don't want to draw. Like DP, for example, you almost never want to draw Celestial or Dasher, but you're happy to draw Fusion Destiny. And so basically, and then the Brave Engine, you pretty much always want to draw Rite of Aramashur or Water Enchantress of the Temple, but you don't want to draw. I mean, even Faithful Adventure is okay to draw, but usually the Griffin Rider or the Equip Spell, while I mean they're not like terrible to draw, but you usually almost always prefer the other cards, and so it's giving this sort of gameplay where you just like almost if you're the opponent, you feel deflated if they draw the good cards, and you feel happy if they draw the bad cards, and then if you're the player that's playing the cards, you feel the exact opposite, and so it's almost like someone's always unhappy with how the other person drew, and obviously there's always going to be unhappy people with how like my opponent drew broken, right? Of course there's always going to be people saying that, but I just don't like that kind of card design, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's a lot of engines right now, especially the Brave engine, most notable, that has just really rocked the game. And it's pretty crazy too, because when we first got told about like the Brave stuff, nobody was really jumping to like want to play it. But then one person in the OCG put their Brave engine in their Prank Kid deck, and then now everyone just wants it. It's $400. Like, it's crazy. But for me, I really don't think these big engine decks are really healthy for the game. So I actually had my opinion changed very hard, because I used to be on the boat that said, let's not ban Anaconda, let's ban like the other problems last format, right? Like Protoss and whatnot, like those were the bigger issue. Anaconda is fine. Now, after seeing Anaconda and like you can Impermasoul, you can Ash the Brave Girl, you can just interact with every engine, and then they just end up going into Anaconda anyway. Like, to me, that's really unhealthy for the game. So I would love to see an Anaconda ban. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I think that it really would make the game in a better direction from where it is now.
Yeah, actually, this is interesting. I played at a tournament and just anecdotal evidence, but basically, if you're not playing against Sword Soul or Floowandereeze, there is an Anaconda in like every deck, and it's not gonna get better. There's gonna be more Anacondas than ever. As newer cards continue to be printed. So we may talk about that later. But yeah, I can see the case for banning Anaconda. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's just crazy, right? Because like back when like every deck was just pure, and then you just played through all the cards, you're like, yes, I stopped them in every possible spot. Like, there's nothing else they can do. They're gonna pass. And then now they're just like Link Spider, Anaconda, and you're just like, man, there's something else. Like, yeah. So I don't know. I wouldn't want to just like sit here and just talk over and over about like, yeah, Anaconda, because like that's what everyone's doing right now. Like everyone's just like, yeah, ban it, please. But at the same time, I really feel like this is just a discussion that just needs to be had, because looking at where it is now, I feel like it almost should have just been banned last format and called it a day. Because I feel like if Anaconda was banned last format, Scythe and Dagda would not have been a big problem this format. That might just be me, but I don't think they would have been as big of an issue.
I agree. I mean, obviously, definitely they wouldn't have been as big an issue. I mean, it's interesting because I also think one of the biggest problems with the Brave Engine is it just gives you a free token. Like even if you kill the Faithful Adventure with Ghost Dagger, for example, right? You're still not trading 1-for-1. Isn't that crazy? They still get a token, and that's like a Link Spider. That's a half of a Verte already, right there. And you already traded a hand trap for it, which is crazy, right? And all the decks that run the Brave Engine, almost none of them care about the restriction. There's no drawback to activating Rite of Aramashur. They're not going to use normal summon effects anyway. So I think that's part of the problem, as well as they're just leaving a lot of free material on the board. It's easier than ever to make Anaconda, so
yeah, absolutely. And just kind of like sliding off of that too, and talking about engines in the game and just like Scythe in general, I really don't see that much Scythe anymore. It was really just in the Cyber Eldritch decks and like the PK Brave decks. But like now, even in like the base or the 3-axis, like it's not a main focus of the deck anymore. Like it's really just going back to like the you can't break my board format. which is equally pretty interesting though, because the boards are getting pretty big too. But like Scythe, like although it is like a pretty big issue, I see it kind of phasing out now. Like, what do you see about this deck in the format so far, and what do you think?
Yeah, this card's always been. It's one of those cards, right? That like it's kind of uninteractive. It's either really, really good or just pretty terrible. And sometimes it's all like in the middle. Very rarely though. And I think it definitely is. Like you're seeing more of it because of the DPE Brave. But of course, you know, Scythe is an easy card to adjust to. It's like just play more hand traps. And like you have to stop it. You don't have a choice. And so it's like that little like. I think what you're seeing right now is almost like a little economics balancing, where it's like, well, okay, if my opponents are just going to stop me, I'm going to not bother playing the brick in my deck. And, you know, so it's like, okay, well, if people are not trying to stop me, then, you know, more people are going to put Scythe back in their decks. I really think it's too easy to get the DPE and the Dagda out. It's just way too easy. Like you can do it with one card. That's so messed up. And so, you know, and it's not even susceptible to hand traps because of the Brave engine. So yeah, I think that's really the main problem with Scythe. Although I wouldn't mind seeing it banned. I wouldn't, you know, I wouldn't be crying about it, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'm just not a huge fan of win buttons personally. So it's one of those things too where like we're allowed to have nice cards in this game without them needing to be banned, but at the same time, like, man, we really don't need win buttons like this that are just like continuous. I've been talking to people that are really upset about cards like D-Shifter and Droll too, just because they're like just the whole turn you can't play the game. But I don't really know, because like those cards I feel like are also considered win buttons to a point. D-Shifter for sure, Droll less. But like, if you're playing an OTK deck that can just utilize that, right? Like at the same time, your opponent usually, if they're impactful, they're like insane, right? Especially Droll. And so that's where like those cards, a lot of people have like really negative opinions on them. I personally hate D-Shifter, but like that card's not going anywhere anytime soon because it's only good in Fluenderies, and that deck is not the best, most crazy deck that everyone's playing. Like it's great, but like not everyone's on that deck, right? And it's not like that prevalent. That's why Storm isn't banned yet either. Just because there's not a whole lot of decks that can use them. That's why they're only good in a vacuum. So even like Scythe, right? Like we haven't really seen Scythe that often. It's usually like 3 Sanctum, 1 Scythe in the sideboard. Especially because Lancia is so good right now. So like people are using Lancia off the Sanctum as well. So I don't know. Maybe we'll see a Scythe ban, but I feel like it's actually just going to end up dodging another list.
Yeah, it probably will. It probably will. If I had to bet on it, I would bet it would not be on the ban list. D-Shifter's an interesting point. That's another example of a card design that I just despise. Like, if you draw D-Shifter in the game where you already have cards in your graveyard, you're annoyed. If you draw it first turn, your opponent's annoyed. Someone's always super annoyed when this card is activated or drawn, right? And so, like, you know, that's just how it is. It's kind of, I don't like that kind of card design.
Hey, shout out to the 3v3 at the PPG. I played through D-Shifter full combo with my hand with Striker blind second. Felt insane.
Yeah, it's not all. It's like Scythe, right? It's not always a total blowout, like, but a lot of the times it is.
Yeah.
And like, there are a couple percentage of games that don't, just like, oh well, you D-Shifter me, I lost. But you know, a lot of games are, and so it's kind of frustrating when that happens to you.
Oh, absolutely. And so there's also another thing that I feel like is pretty frustrating in this game that a lot of people are against right now, and that's Prank Kid. How do you feel about this deck?
Yeah, I hate this deck. I'm not gonna lie, I hate this deck. And it's frustrating because I feel like it does take some skill to play, less so than it used to, I think. Because the combos are like so... Everyone knows the combos now. They like do the same thing. And they don't play like... You're not playing Poly or the multiple effusion spells, so like nothing changes. You're not drawing Poly like, oh, I have a different combo because I drew Poly.
Right.
You know, it's just always the exact same. And I just... all the effects, you know, burn, gain, you know, it's like it's just kind of, it's just so miserable to play against sometimes.
I feel like the harder part about this deck, right, is like when they activate Bow Wow and they can't be killed by card effects, or they can go Weather Watcher against like Striker and they can be killed by Battle. Like, there's a lot of things they can do to just maintain their advantage, which is pretty crazy. And then like, I was at the PVG and somebody big brained me so hard. So like they're on Prank Kid and they were doing full combo, and then they used their last Prank Kid and they made Pranks into a token, made Link Spider Anaconda. And they go, pay 2k Anaconda, send Fusion Destiny, I impermit. And he goes, activate Fusion Destiny from hand. And I was like, you did not.
Yeah, yeah, actually, that's a good play. Because, okay, think about it. You're going to activate the Fusion Destiny anyway.
Right.
And you have no use for the other two monsters. I've been doing this more and more, actually. So just make the Anaconda. Who cares, right? It's 2,000 life points, you might get a hand trap. Right? The 2,000 life points, usually meaningless. And you might get a free hand trap out of it, which is I like that play a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was crazy. I was like, wow, applause. Like that was crazy. But yeah, so like Prank Kids, they just have the ability to do that because like let's say like the Anaconda went through, right? And like they got to summon it. They could just summon Roxy's next turn and banish that Fusion Destiny and draw a new card. Like, the deck just has such a resilience to the game right now, and they can play so many hand traps, they can play so many engines, and it's just like all one card starters. If anything, my next ban list, I could see Meow getting banned. I could definitely see that card just going, being completely real, because this deck is everywhere right now, and so we'll see how it goes moving forward, but Meow could be the next one on the chopping block.
Yeah, if I had to put money on it, I don't think they will. Just because I mean, I'd be happy. I'd agree with you on that one. You know, like any deck that incentivizes players to like start the game as late as possible and take as long as possible is just a deck I just don't think should exist. And you know, one interesting thought that I don't think will happen, but I've always wondered what would happen if they did to hit this deck is to ban pranks. Because I feel like if you hit anything else, the deck just dies. Like if you ban Meow Mew, like which is great. Like I'd be happy too. Like hey, this deck's unplayable now. But if you ban pranks, it'd be really interesting because you just don't get that free like recursion. You know, like you have to actually commit to playing a lot more prank kids in your extra deck. And there'll be less splashing, less recycling. You feel like you can actually grind with the deck. Whereas right now, if you enter a grind game with prank kids, you've got to be playing like Plunder Patrol or something to outgrind them. So, yeah, I would be really interesting to see Pranks get banned, but I don't think it'll happen.
Yeah, the Pranks ban would be really interesting too, just because of the Meow Mew recycle for sure. I definitely something needs to happen to the deck, and like that was the big discussion before, right? Was what do we do to this deck without just absolutely killing it? And so that's where they were like, Meow Mew to 1, and so like. At first, it felt kind of nice because we're like, all right, like they get the 1 summon. If we break the board, they can't play. But like now, I'm kind of sitting here thinking like maybe it's not the best answer for this deck. But maybe that's also just because there's so many engines that are also tied up with it, right? So they're gonna do something on this next list, but we'll just have to see what that is, right?
Yeah, I mean, this one another point is like. Prank Kids is one of those decks that abuses these engines the best. It works so well with the Brave engine. It works well with DPE, and it's one of those decks that like it takes advantage of the best engines in the format, and that's one of the reasons why it's good. Not the other way around. I mean, Prank Kids is a pretty solid deck already, but just the combination is really quite killer.
I agree, and kind of just moving off that too. Talking about like the events and how the events are going, we did just get a brand new time rule that's bumping up to 45 minutes. Have you gotten a chance to play under this rule yet?
I did actually, and I love it. It does feel like a lot more time. I'm still a fan of just make it 50. Like I think so. I mean the trade-off. I mean, obviously you want as long a round as possible that doesn't make the tournament feel too long. That's always the trade-off you're balancing, right? And I have always felt that at events, like most of the time, it's like the really long delays are not because the rounds would be an extra 10 minutes, but because like someone is arguing with a judge, or like it's a he said she said like at a big regional or a big OICS. and it's a huge, everyone, like all the judges are crowded around the table, and everyone's like, what the heck's going on? So I find that that's usually what makes the events take forever. I'm a fan of it. I just think they could even make it 50, but I'll take 45.
Yeah, honestly, 45 felt amazing when I was at the PPG and they like announced like, yeah, we're using the new 45-minute rule. I was like, I don't know how long this is gonna be, but like at the same time, it never really felt like I didn't have enough time. Like I never went in at time one time. That's a lot of time, by the way. I said that a lot, but still. No, it felt fantastic, honestly. It never really felt like I was down to the wire. I was still a big fan of saying just make it 0-1, and so you have to give your opponent rebuttal so it doesn't lead to anything cheeky in time anymore. But at the same time, having the extra 5 minutes, it really does go a long way. And I really feel like even at the YCS coming up here this weekend, it's going to affect that very heavily. And I think that's actually just something that's a big relief, because I don't think that a lot of people have actually gotten the ability to play under this new time rule yet, because it was only at like I think one regional, and then it was at the PPG. So this is gonna be like the first big event besides the PPG that everyone will actually be able to see how it goes. But in the end, I think it was a really smart decision. I think it was really nice.
Yeah, it's great. I have seen with turns. One issue, I've been a judge a couple of times, and one issue that they used to tell judges back in the day was like, hey, just because they're in turns doesn't mean the slow play rules don't apply to them. And I think we as judges probably give out way too few slow play penalties than we should be giving out. And so like that's one of like, oh, I'm in turns now, so it doesn't matter how long I take. Well, that's what makes the games take forever with turns. That's what used to happen with like 5. That was just crazy, 5 turns. But a 0-1 could be good. We'll see. I think they're trying to avoid turns for that reason, because their statistics show that when you give people untimed turns, they just take forever. But yeah, I'm a fan. More time, the better, I always say.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting change. I didn't even see that one coming. So I mean, it was the right call, I think. So moving into what our new format's going to be like. We've talked a lot about what it is right now, what we're seeing, but there's going to be a brand new ban list sometime in May, I would expect, because it was a few months after the February list. So I would imagine probably May, maybe early June, that we're going to be seeing a list coming out pretty soon. But the next big deck that we're supposed to be receiving is Despia. Now, we already have a lot of the pieces here, and the deck is already seeing some results, which is really nice because it's definitely promising, where we saw like the Phantom Knight deck really get picked up and then all of a sudden just fell off completely because a lot of people realized that it bricked a lot. But I feel like this is one of those decks that could potentially live up to the hype. Do you think that it will?
Oh, definitely. This just, I mean, definitely will live up to the hype. First of all, even if it's not like the best deck, the fact that it's in a structure deck, you're gonna see it, right? Like you're gonna see a lot of it, and there's so many ways to, like, it's not just pure Despia or Brave Despia or Adventure Despia that you can play. You can play a lot of these engines in any deck. There's branded Tri-Brigade going around, which I've been experimenting with. So you're gonna see it for sure. I think it's gonna be a big part of the meta.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite versions of this so far is going to be the branded dinos, because we saw Shadal dinos like so long ago, right? And like Shadal Fusion was so crazy in that deck going second, but imagine branded Fusion going second now.
Yeah,
insane.
Exactly right. Dinos is one of those decks that already doesn't need its extra deck too much. Like there is so much potential in this deck, that's for sure. So
yeah, and like the Despia deck already, like they already have insane cards like Patchwork too, right? Like that card is nuts. And the fact that it adds Chain, which then also floats into more advantage, like it's actually insane. So I see this deck doing really well just for the sole fact that it has so many different cards in the engine already that are so strong. And one card that we've seen go from 1 to 3 in most lists is branded in red. This card actually just allows you to dodge things like Call by the Grave, which I think is also pretty incredible, right? If you have like your Aluber on field and you try to use the effect and they go Imperm, then you can go Chain Branded in red and remove it from the field so it loses its target. There's a lot of really cool things that I'm seeing already, so I can't even imagine when the structure drops what we're going to be looking at.
Yeah, I just look at this. It's like Tri-Brigade Revolt, but as a quick play spell, which is like way better than being a trap. Like if this card was a trap, it'd probably not be very good. but it's a quick play spell, which is just humongous.
Can't red reboot that.
But yeah, can't red reboot that. You can use it on the first turn, like you said, to play around hand traps. Scary.
Yeah, you know what's funny about this card? Same as Revolt though.
What's funny about it?
You can bell both.
Yeah, you can bell both. That's true. So
that's true. I want to have a conversation with you real quick. All right.
Okay.
There are certain cards that I absolutely hate seeing in this game, especially when they're meta and they're stables. One of them being Super Poly. This card is just insane. If it ever gets activated, it's usually lethal. How do you feel about this card being in the game again at 3 and really just being effective in the next format?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I love it because I'm going to be playing Gren Maju a lot of the time, and I always say when Super Poly is good, that gives Gren Maju a chance because you don't really want to be playing too many hand traps in that deck, and you want to be playing cards like Super Poly that not only get rid of your opponent's board, but also put a level 8 on the field for you a lot of the time. And I would say cards like Super Poly, like Droll and Lockbird, Dimension Shifter, I think you mentioned before, Winda, Mystic Mind. These cards are all in the same vein, sort of. And I always say it's what your deck can play and what your deck sucks against that makes you the most annoyed, right? Like, for example, like Mystic Mind really annoys some players, but I know you're a big fan of it. I saw you do really well with it at PPG Kentucky, right? And it's because it works well in your deck. And if someone activates Mystic Mind on you, you're like, whatever, that's cool, right? Like, hey, it's Mystic Mind. Like, I can deal with that just fine in my striker deck.
Right.
Whereas, like, Super Poly is like, especially game 1, like it's rough because you can't play around it. I mean, you can, but like, are you really playing around a game 1 Super Poly? I mean, I feel like in games 2 and 3 there are, some measures that you can take. Obviously, that's the risk you have to take. Do you want to play around the card or not? But yeah, I think it's just one of those cards that, like, if you like playing it, then you'll be happy. Like, if you're playing Plunder Patrol, like, are you really gonna care if someone has Super Poly? No, right?
Right.
So it depends on, I think, your personal deck choices almost.
Yeah, and honestly, when a card like this is meta, I feel like the better call is to play things like Shadal's Hero, like the decks that just hard counter this, right? Because like they can abuse Super Poly like way better with the things that they run in their extra deck. So I think that we might end up seeing like the Battle of the Fusions next format, which I think would be really interesting. Especially since like Shadal is always one of those things too. Like they made a structure deck for it because so many people love that archetype, and I'm no different. I love Shadal's, right? I think the artwork in that is just like insane. So I think that like just those types of meta calls too, when a card like this is just active, isn't the worst thing. Like, even I'm playing Ghost Second Striker, you best believe I'm gonna have Super Poly in my list. Like, we're breaking boards. But if I'm playing against Despia and they have a set card, I'm just automatically assuming that it's Super Poly. So, like, that's just gonna be the big thing next format. I think this back row removal is going to be a thing again. Like, we just need to make sure that we understand this is the card and that you need to clear it before you can start attempting to break a board. But then they have cards like Masquerade, where you're burning like 600, 1200 before you can even start doing anything. So, interesting gameplay that's going to happen next point for sure.
Yeah. I hope it doesn't get banned. That'd be rough. Desires and then Super Poly getting hit. Oof. Yeah. That'd be tough for me, but we'll have to see what happens.
I think it'd be a cool pre-check to hit Super Poly or Patchwork. But we'll have to see what happens. I don't know. There's not a whole lot of decks out there that ever really deserved a pre-check. But, like, I think this might be one of them. So we'll have to see how it shapes up, right? Because we don't want another Pepe situation where first YCS and then all of a sudden evan. But, we'll see.
Yeah, I could see Dragoon getting hit early, too. That's, like, a card that, I mean, it's literally, like, free. Branded Fusion is absolutely crazy. A crazy card, so lots of things. You're gonna be seeing a lot of dimensional barriers, that's for sure. A lot of fusion hate and side decks coming up, so
I've always been a fan of like the weird floodgates, right? Like Quiet Life or just like the odd ones. I think that it'd be very not optimal, but like there is non-fusion area. So like
there is non-fusion area. Yeah, the card's not terrible. I think, you know, like, I mean, it's good against the pure Despia deck. That's for sure. Obviously, Brave is what makes this deck so strong, I think, a lot of the time, you know, being able to, like you said, bounce. Just to use the quick spell bounce in non-fusion area, you know, is crazy.
There's a lot of people out there who are like, if you activate like the right, how are you gonna get the Eluber effect? But I'm like, do you remember that branded opening's a card? Like, the card's also very free when you have Draco back in your hand. So
exactly,
pretty crazy. But we'll have to see how the whole format shapes up. I'm interested to see how it goes. Kind of wrapping things up here. Do you have any final thoughts on the whole of the next format and what we're dealing with now?
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to it. You know, it's going to be interesting. I feel like Konami goes through periods and like players are like, we want more fusion cards. Konami's like, all right, that's what you're going to get then. And so, you know, we get to see a lot of fusions coming out. I'm hoping the deck will have weaknesses. That's really what I look for. You know, a lot of times, like right now, it feels like some of these decks don't have weaknesses, like Prank Kids. You can try to hand trap it, but I mean, what are you going to side that's good against Prank Kids? Like, not much. At least there's cards like Super Poly, Dimensional Barrier. You know, we should see some interesting innovations, I think, in this next format.
Yeah, that's one thing that I'm definitely hoping for, because there's just so many different decks out there right now, and just like with the Brave Engine alone, how many different decks it enables, that once we see a new ban list, you can only imagine the other decks that are going to become relevant again. And you just got to kind of predict that and just understand the card pool in the game, because like we're getting, I think, another 3 decks coming up very soon as well. So hopefully the format becomes... So in my opinion, I really like triangle formats. So I kind of am hoping for it to become a triangle format, because it's already pretty open-ended as to anything that you could play. But, you know, we'll just have to see how it shapes up.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Well, I mean, the ban list is coming. You know, we'll see what Konami thinks. Please bring back Desires, Konami. I'm begging you.
I agree.
Other than that, yeah, we'll have to see what happens for sure. For sure.
Hey, well, I appreciate you coming on the channel today. It's been a blast. This has been a fun conversation, just to kind of discuss things on the game right now, just kind of the state of where we're at, because I feel like we need these checkups here and there to have a little dialogue, a little heart-to-heart with the community about like what we feel is going on in the game and how we feel about it. Because going into the next format, I hope that it just gets a little healthier, because I feel like right now the game is kind of teetering on the edge of, is it healthy? Is it too broken? And I feel like there's people that are really split on that right now.
Yeah. I think it's a tough question. I don't know if it's healthy or too broken, but I don't know. The game's pretty fun to play still, so yeah. You know, at least there's that.
I agree. Well, everyone, I hope that you all have a wonderful night, and we'll catch you all in the next video. Thanks.